Ever wonder why cartoon studios kept secret vaults? The 1950s and 60s weren't just Mickey Mouse and fairy tales. Animation studios produced forbidden reels that governments locked away. Directors smuggled across borders, and viewers risked their freedom to watch. Which colorful masterpiece caused diplomatic incidents between superpowers? Buckle up for the wildest animation history lesson they never taught you. The Tale of Priest and His Worker, Balda. USSR, 1960s. How do you get banned before hitting screens? Just ask the creators of The Tale of the Priest and His Worker, Balda. This Soviet animation adaptation of Alexander Pushkin's satirical poem was set to showcase everything brilliant about Russian animation until slamming headfirst into government censorship. Bright colors, wild visual gags, and razor-sharp satire about a greedy priest trying to cheat his clever servant made this film dangerously appealing. The problem? Pushkin's story mocked authority, especially religious figures, and Soviet officials worried audiences might apply that mockery to government leaders too. As the film neared completion, nervous bureaucrats started whispering. Maybe it was too funny. Maybe viewers would see themselves in Balda's rebellion against power. Meetings were held, memos circulated, and the nearly finished movie vanished into production limbo, its animators reassigned to safer, blander projects. For years, completed footage gathered dust in locked archives. Only fragments ever leaked out, passed through underground animator circles in grainy black and white copies, or discussed in hushed tones at artist cafes. Soviet animation historian Boris Krylov later noted, it wasn't just anti-clergy sentiment officials feared. They recognized the film's visual energy contained sparks of rebellion beneath its folk-tale surface. Today, the lost Balda stands as a symbol that even in systems built on control, art finds ways to challenge power. The most subversive stories are often the ones authorities never let you see. Yellow Submarine, UK, 1968. Picture this. 1968. Revolution fills streets worldwide. Psychedelia warps minds. The planet's biggest rock band drops an animated fever dream bursting with kaleidoscopic imagery and anti-authority messages. Yellow Submarine wasn't just a Beatles cash-in. It was a full-blown counterculture manifesto painted in animation cells. The film's wild experimental style exploded with avant-garde visuals, shape-shifting characters, and dizzying transitions. The story? John, Paul, George, and Ringo rescue Pepperland from the oppressive Blue Meanies using only music, love, and gleeful disregard for authority. Subtle, it wasn't. South African censors took one horrified look at the film's trippy imagery and anti-establishment themes and slammed down an immediate ban. Brazil and parts of the Arab world quickly followed suit. Government officials claimed the movie's abstract symbolism and rebellion against military-like authority threatened social order. British film critic Kenneth Robinson observed, "What frightened authorities wasn't the cartoon itself, but how eagerly young viewers absorbed its message that creativity triumphs over control." Parent groups in America and Britain wrung their hands over its strange influence on children. Was it innocent musical fantasy, or a subversive tool sneaking revolutionary ideas into young minds? Either way, bootleg screenings became badges of honor for counterculture youth. The film's art director, Heinz Edelman, later admitted, "We weren't trying to start a revolution. We just wanted to break every animation rule possible." They succeeded spectacularly, forever changing what animation could accomplish, whether authorities liked it or not. Tales of the Street Corner, Japan, 1962. Not all banned animation screams controversy. Sometimes the quiet ones hit hardest. Tales of the Street Corner, directed by Taiichi Yamamoto, proves the most powerful artistic rebellion can come wrapped in poetic beauty. Set on a nameless city corner, this Japanese masterpiece weaves together the lives of animals, posters, and people as war slowly descends, all without a single line of spoken dialogue. The city, rendered in experimental animation, crumbles as bombers roar overhead. Posters on walls reflect shifting moods, advertising, then propaganda, then fear, then sorrow. What made Street Corner dangerous wasn't explicit imagery, but its uncompromising anti-war stance. There are no heroes, no triumphant battles, just ordinary lives destroyed by conflict. South Korean and Taiwanese authorities during periods of military tension saw the film's refusal to glorify war as dangerously subversive. They yanked it from festivals and erased it from television schedules. Japanese film critic Tadao Sato wrote, "Yamamoto accomplished what politicians feared most, making viewers question why nations wage war at all." Even in Japan, the film faced soft censorship, limited releases, discouraged promotion, and nervous distributors who worried it was too pessimistic for audiences. Meanwhile, student activists traded copies like contraband, screening it at underground meetings. Animation historian Helen McCarthy noted, its power came from showing war's impact on everyday things. A flower, a poster, a stray cat, making distant politics suddenly intimate and personal. Yamamoto's quiet masterpiece influenced generations of anti-war anime, from Grave of the Fireflies to In This Corner of the World. Sometimes, the boldest statement an artist can make is simply refusing to look away from uncomfortable truths. Belladonna of Sadness, Japan, 1969. Imagine an animated film so bold, so hallucinatory, and so boundary-shattering that studio executives tried erasing it before completion. Belladonna of Sadness didn't just push envelopes, it set them ablaze. While technically released in the early 1970s, this Japanese psychedelic nightmare began haunting animation circles in 1969 through leaked storyboards and test footage. Created by Mushi Production, the studio behind family-friendly Astro Boy, Belladonna spun a medieval tale of a woman named Jeanne whose life spirals into witchcraft and mysticism after suffering brutality from feudal authorities. The film's aesthetic was an acid-drenched fever dream, watercolor explosions, surreal transformations, and disturbing imagery inspired by European art movements. Preview screenings were met with stunned silence, followed by outrage. Conservative critics called it animation perverted into decadence. Studio financiers began pulling out. Production nearly halted entirely. Animation historian Ernest Rister noted, the film represented everything conservative Japan feared about Western influence: artistic rebellion against tradition, questioning authority, and frank depictions of troubling historical realities. Entire test reels were reportedly destroyed to prevent scandal. The final version, heavily edited, eventually reached theaters years later, but faced bans across Europe and limited distribution in America. The film's artistic director, Kuni Fukai, later remarked, "We weren't making a cartoon. We were creating visual poetry about suffering and power." Of course, authorities found it threatening. Belladonna almost bankrupted its studio but cemented its place in animation history as the film that proved cartoons could tackle the darkest aspects of human experience. Director Eiichi Yamamoto refused to apologize, stating, "Animation should not be imprisoned in childhood fantasies when it can express our deepest nightmares." Animal Farm, UK, 1954. Who would have thought a cartoon about barnyard animals would be secretly funded by an intelligence agency? Animal Farm, the first British animated feature film, has a backstory more twisted than its plot. Based on George Orwell's allegorical novel criticizing Soviet totalitarianism, the film portrays animals overthrowing their human farmer only to watch their pig leaders become just as corrupt. What audiences didn't know was that the CIA secretly funded the production as anti-communist propaganda during the Cold War's height. The film's dark tone shocked viewers expecting talking animal cuteness. Instead, they got political betrayal, manipulation, and a brutal animated sequence where horses are sent to glue factories. The stark ending, where the pigs become indistinguishable from humans, was far from the happy conclusions audiences expected from animation. Soviet-aligned countries banned it immediately. East Germany called it fascist poison. Yugoslavia filed formal diplomatic protests. Even in America, some theaters refused to show a cartoon depicting political execution, no matter how metaphorical. Film producer Louis de Rochemont defended the film's unflinching approach. "We refuse to water down Orwell's message with dancing mice or singing ducks. Animation should be capable of telling serious stories." The film's lead animator, John Hallis, only learned decades later about CIA involvement. When interviewed in 1990, he remarked, "We thought we were making anti-totalitarian art. Ironic that government agencies were pulling strings behind us all along." Animal Farm fundamentally challenged what animation could tackle. As animation historian Brian Sibley noted, It forced audiences to recognize that the medium could deliver political messages as effectively as live action, perhaps more so because viewers let their guard down for cartoons. Sometimes the most controversial thing about a film isn't what's on screen. It's who's secretly funding it. The Snow Queen, USSR, 1957. When is a children's fairy tale considered dangerous propaganda? When it comes from behind the Iron Curtain. The Soviet Union's Snezhna Kraleva might seem an unlikely candidate for censorship, but in Franco's Spain, this animated adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's classic was treated like a communist invasion. The film itself was a visual marvel, hand-drawn animation with rich colors and haunting winter landscapes that brought Andersen's world to shimmering life. Critics worldwide praised its artistic achievement. It won awards at international film festivals, yet Spanish authorities branded it unfit for public exhibition. The reasoning had nothing to do with content. The film's actual story celebrates courage, friendship, and loyalty, values Franco's regime claimed to champion. The problem? It was made in Moscow. Spanish officials officially declared it incompatible with Spanish values. Unofficially, they feared Soviet artistry enchanting Spanish children. Russian animation historian Dmitry Babachenko explained, "Censors weren't watching the movie. They were seeing ghosts of ideological contamination. They banned excellence because of its origin. The ban only fueled curiosity. Black market film clubs began smuggling dubbed copies for secret screenings. Spanish animation enthusiasts risked penalties to watch what was, essentially, just a beautiful fairy tale. When animation director Lev Atamanov learned of the ban, he reportedly remarked, "So Spain fears talking snowflakes more than American missiles on their soil?" Politics makes strange logics. With Franco's death in 1975, the ban lifted, and The Snow Queen finally reached Spanish theaters nearly 2 decades late. Today, it's celebrated as both a masterpiece of animation and a reminder that art becomes most powerful precisely when authorities try suppressing it. Sometimes, in the blizzard of Cold War politics, even snowflakes became weapons. The Sinbad Trilogy, Czechoslovakia, 1958 to 1962. How do you make fairy tales dangerous? Ask Carol Zeman, whose groundbreaking Sinbad animated trilogy became both international sensation and political headache during the height of Cold War tensions. Zeman's unique combination of live actors, stop-motion animation, and hand-drawn elements created a dreamlike visual style unlike anything viewers had seen before. His adaptations of Arabian Nights tales featured magical journeys, fantastic creatures, and dazzling special effects accomplished without computers or modern technology. Western critics called them miracles of imagination. Film historians ranked them alongside pioneering works of Georges Méliès. But Zeman's masterpieces faced an unexpected obstacle: Cold War politics. American distributors worried that Czechoslovakian films, regardless of content, would be viewed as communist propaganda. When finally released in edited versions in America, conservative groups protested theaters showing foreign propaganda aimed at children. The films contained no political messages whatsoever, but their origins behind the Iron Curtain made them suspicious. Film critic Andrew Sarris wrote, "Zeman's crime wasn't the content of his films, but creating beauty that defied the narrative that communist countries produced only gray propaganda." Meanwhile, in Czechoslovakia, authorities grew nervous about Zeman's international acclaim. His artistic independence and refusal to include approved political messages made cultural commissars uncomfortable. They limited his resources and restricted his foreign travel. Director Terry Gilliam later acknowledged Zeman as a primary influence. "He showed me animation could create worlds more convincing than reality." The tragedy is how politics prevented many from experiencing his genius. The complete uncensored trilogy wasn't widely available in America until the 1990s, decades after their creation. Czech film preservationist Tomáš Jurek noted, "Sometimes the most subversive act is simply creating beauty when the world demands you take political sides." Heaven and Earth Magic. USA 1957 to 1962. What happens when animation abandons all rules and ventures into pure surrealism? Heaven and Earth Magic, experimental animator Harry Smith's fever dream, answers that question with moving collages that drove censors to distraction and audiences to bewilderment. Smith spent 5 years crafting this handmade animated collage from Victorian illustrations, creating a dreamlike narrative about a woman, a dog, and watermelons that transforms into an exploration of cosmic forces. There's no conventional plot, just haunting symbols, mysterious transformations, and hypnotic rhythms. The film proved too bizarre for commercial distribution. Theater owners who booked it based on its artistic reputation faced walkouts and demands for refunds. University screenings sparked heated debates about whether it constituted obscenity, despite containing no explicit imagery. The film's hypnotic, disorienting quality led some conservative critics to claim it mimicked drug experiences and should be banned. Filmmaker Jonas Mekas defended Smith's work. "This isn't obscenity, it's the purest form of visual poetry. If audiences find it disturbing, perhaps they should question why unfamiliar imagery frightens them." Smith himself never helped his case. When asked to explain his film's meaning at a 1962 festival, he reportedly answered, "If I could explain it in words, I wouldn't have spent 5 years making pictures move." This apparent dismissal of authority figures only increased official suspicion. While never officially banned nationwide, Heaven and Earth Magic faced so many local restrictions, canceled screenings, and distribution problems that it effectively disappeared from public view for decades. Film historian P. Adams Sitney later called it the most influential experimental animation almost nobody actually saw. Smith's magnum opus represents animation pushed to its boundaries, the point where images escape storylines and tap directly into the subconscious. Sometimes, the most controversial art isn't what shocks us, but what we can't categorize or control. Son of Sinbad, USA, 1955. How controversial could a Hollywood adventure film become? When RKO Pictures released Son of Sinbad, they discovered the answer. Controversial enough to battle censors for 2 years and face outright bans even after extensive editing. This Technicolor Arabian Nights fantasy combined live action with animated sequences that pushed boundaries of what was acceptable in 1950s family entertainment. The film's animated dream sequences featured scantily clad harem dancers, magical transformations, and thinly veiled innuendo that immediately triggered production code administration concerns. RKO initially received an outright rejection. Producer Howard Hughes refused to make all demanded cuts, creating a standoff that delayed release for 2 years. When finally approved with an unprecedented B rating, the film still faced local censorship boards who made additional cuts. Film historian Richard Corliss noted, "The animated sequences caused particular concern because censors believed cartoons inherently attracted children, making the suggestive content more problematic than in live-action films." Massachusetts banned it entirely. Several southern states required theaters to sign agreements not to admit minors. International distribution faced even greater challenges. Italy, Spain, and Ireland refused classification altogether, effectively banning it. The film's troubled history became part of its marketing. Posters provocatively asked, "Too hot for censors?" This controversy-baiting approach worked financially. The film earned back triple its production costs despite limited distribution. Director Ted Tetzlaff defended the animated sequences. "We weren't trying to corrupt anyone. We wanted to capture the genuine spirit of the original Arabian Nights tales, which were never meant for children anyway." Son of Sinbad stands as a fascinating example of how animation became a particular flashpoint in censorship battles, deemed more dangerous than identical content in live action because of animation's perceived connection to younger audiences. The Hangman USA, 1964. How does a simple animated short earn the distinction of being banned from schools, television, and public libraries? The Hangman, Les Goldman's stark adaptation of Morris Ogden's poem about the dangers of political complacency, manages this rare trifecta. Using minimalist black and white animation, the film tells the story of a town where citizens stand by as a mysterious hangman arrives and builds a gallows. One by one, he claims victims while townsfolk rationalize their inaction until no one remains to speak up. The allegory about fascism's rise and the failure to resist couldn't be clearer. The film won critical acclaim and festival awards, but faced an unexpected backlash when distributed to educational markets. School boards in multiple states banned it as un-American, and promoting distrust of authority. Television networks refused to air it during animation blocks, claiming it was too disturbing for the cartoon time slot. Director Les Goldman defended his work. "We created animation specifically to deliver an important message about moral courage. The discomfort viewers feel is precisely the point." The film became a flashpoint in larger cultural debates about what content was appropriate for younger viewers. Animation, still largely seen as children's entertainment in the 1960s, wasn't supposed to address political persecution or moral cowardice. Civil liberties organizations championed the film, organizing special screenings when public libraries removed it from circulation. The controversy actually increased its viewership among college students and intellectuals. Film critic Judith Crist praised its artistic courage. "The Hangman demonstrates that animation can deliver political messages with a force live action cannot match. Perhaps that's precisely why it frightens authority figures." The film's reputation has only grown with time. In 2000, the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry. A strange fate for a work once deemed too dangerous for those same libraries to circulate. Sometimes animation's greatest power lies in stripping away distractions to reveal uncomfortable truths we'd rather ignore. The Little Island, UK, 1958. Can philosophical debates become too dangerous for animation? Richard Williams' debut film, The Little Island, answers with a resounding yes, proving abstract ideas could stir as much controversy as explicit imagery. This hand-drawn masterpiece follows three tiny men representing truth, beauty, and good as they discover an island and promptly begin fighting over whose principle matters most. What starts as comical bickering escalates into surreal, violent confrontation where their ideas literally transform into weapons. The film won the BAFTA for Best Animated Film but faced unexpected challenges. BBC programmers deemed it too intellectually provocative for general broadcast. Educational distributors worried its satirical treatment of philosophical absolutes might confuse young viewers about moral certainty. Most surprisingly, religious organizations across denominations objected to its implied criticism of dogmatic thinking. Several faith-based school systems in Britain and Canada banned it from their film libraries. Williams seemed genuinely surprised by the backlash. "We weren't attacking belief systems. We were illustrating how principles become dangerous when wielded as weapons against others." Apparently, that observation itself was controversial. The film found champions in unexpected places. Philosopher Bertrand Russell reportedly called it the most honest portrayal of ideological conflict I've seen. Animation students circulated copies as evidence that cartoons could tackle sophisticated concepts. While never subjected to formal government censorship, The Little Island faced what critics called soft banning, the systematic exclusion from distribution channels that effectively limited its audience to intellectual circles and animation festivals. Animation historian John Canemaker later wrote, "Williams committed animation's cardinal sin, treating viewers as thinking adults rather than passive consumers. The establishment found that far more threatening than any explicit content could be. Sometimes the most dangerous ideas are the ones that question our certainty about what's right." The Singing Ringing Tree, East Germany, 1957. Think communist fairy tales couldn't terrify Western governments? The bizarre case of The Singing Ringing Tree proves otherwise. This East German fantasy film combined live action with animation sequences to create a dreamlike adaptation of Grimm's fairy tales that somehow became a Cold War battleground. The film featured stunning transformation sequences where humans become bears, fish turn to stone, and magical forests come alive through pioneering animation techniques. Western film critics praised its artistic achievement despite its origins behind the Iron Curtain. When BBC acquired broadcast rights in 1964, dubbed it into English, and began airing it as children's entertainment, the backlash was swift and strange. Conservative British politicians demanded an investigation into communist propaganda infiltrating children's television. American media picked up the controversy, warning parents about sinister foreign animation. The film contained no political content whatsoever, just traditional fairy tale themes about vanity, kindness, and transformation. But its East German origin made it inherently suspicious during heightened Cold War tensions. BBC producer Benjamin Whitrow defended the acquisition. "We purchased it for its artistic quality and universal fairy tale themes. The notion that children would become communists from watching a princess rescue a bear is frankly ridiculous." The controversy revealed deep anxieties about animation's power. Government officials openly worried that foreign animation styles might subtly influence children more effectively than obvious propaganda. Multiple school districts banned the film from their libraries despite having never screened it. Film historian Caroline Weaver noted, "The panic around Singing Ringing Tree demonstrated how animation became politicized during the Cold War. Authorities feared children would absorb foreign aesthetics alongside the storytelling." Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, the film became beloved by a generation of British children. When BBC repeated it in the 1970s, viewership records broke as nostalgic adults introduced their children to the fairy tale that once caused parliamentary debates. Sometimes, the strangest censorship battles happen over the most innocent content. Animation's hidden history reveals more about ourselves than any fairy tale. From smuggled reels to diplomatic incidents, these films challenged what moving drawings could accomplish and terrified authorities in the process. Which banned masterpiece would you risk watching? Would today's audiences even blink at content that once caused international incidents? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous art isn't what shocks us, but what makes us question why we're shocked at all. Until next time, keep your eyes open for animation's rebel spirit hiding in plain sight.